They erased me. Just like that. From the most important day of my granddaughter's life. As if I had never existed. My name was nowhere. Nowhere on the invitations. Nowhere in the acknowledgements. Not even whispered among the guests. And the cruelest part? I paid for that wedding. Every flower, every plate, every note of music was funded by me. I gave from my savings, thinking I was building a beautiful memory for my family. Instead, I built a stage for my own humiliation. I never imagined I'd be telling this story to strangers on the internet. But the truth has been boiling inside me for too long, and I need to let it out. I need someone, anyone to hear me. I was a mother, a grandmother, a wife, a provider. I spent my life holding everything together, and when it came time to be honored, I was invisible. This isn't just about a wedding. It's about everything that led to that moment and everything that unraveled after. Let me take you back a little. Before the betrayal, before the silence, before the bitter taste of being forgotten. My name is Margaret. Everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone now in a small house I've called home for over 30 years. I'm not rich, not by any stretch, but I've always made do. I was a widow by 50, and I raised 2 children practically on my own after that. Life didn't hand me much, but I built a life I was proud of. My granddaughter, Emma, was always the light of my life. When she was born, I was the first one to hold her after her mother. I remember her tiny fingers wrapping around mine. From that day, something clicked inside me. I loved her fiercely. I babysat her while my daughter went back to school. I taught her how to bake banana bread and tie her shoelaces. When she was little, she used to say she wanted to grow up and live next door to me forever. Those years were golden. Every Christmas, every birthday, Emma was by my side. She would draw me pictures, call me her best friend, and tell everyone that Grandma Maggie made the best cookies in the world. I still have a box full of her handmade cards. I used to think those memories were unshakable proof of our bond. I never thought they could fade. I never thought she could forget me. But I was wrong. As she grew older, things changed slowly. First, it was the teenage phase. More time with friends, less time with family. I understood. It's natural. I didn't take it personally. Then came college. She moved to another state, and our talks became less frequent. But I still sent care packages, birthday gifts, little texts, to remind her I was thinking of her. Sometimes she responded, sometimes she didn't. Still, I clung to the hope that our bond was strong, that no amount of distance could break it. Then came the engagement. I remember the phone call clearly. My daughter, her mother, called me one afternoon. Her voice was excited, breathless. Emma was getting married. My heart swelled with joy. I cried happy tears. It felt like life had come full circle. My little girl's little girl was becoming a bride, and I was ready to do whatever I could to make it special. I asked what they needed. My daughter said they were tight on budget, so I offered to help. I didn't hesitate. I dipped into my savings, the money I'd been keeping aside for emergencies. I told myself this was an emergency of joy. I wrote checks, thousands, for the venue, the catering, the dress, the decorations. No one asked me twice. They cashed every cent. They thanked me briefly, but I didn't need gratitude. I just wanted to be part of it. To see Emma walk down the aisle, knowing I helped her get there. That was enough for me, or so I thought. The first sign something was wrong came when I asked about the invitations. I just wanted to see them. I imagined a beautiful card with gold lettering, maybe a little ribbon. I pictured reading my name there. Margaret Thompson, proud grandmother of the bride. I asked my daughter to show me one, casually, not thinking anything was amiss. She hesitated. Then she said something vague like, they weren't printed yet. I let it go. But something in her voice didn't sit right. Weeks passed. No invitation came. Not even in the mail. I began to worry. So I asked again. This time I didn't get a reply. My texts were left on read. Calls went unanswered. I tried not to panic. Maybe they were just busy. Wedding planning is stressful. I told myself not to overthink it. I reminded myself that I was family. Of course I'd be invited. I was paying for it, for God's sake. It would be absurd not to include me, wouldn't it? Then I saw the post. One of Emma's friends had shared a picture of the wedding invitation on social media. It was beautiful. Elegant script, floral borders, even a little wax seal. I clicked on it, zoomed in, scanned every word. My heart dropped. My ex-husband's name was there. The man who left us decades ago. The man who never paid a dime for her upbringing. Listed proudly as the grandfather of the bride. But me, I wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not even in a footnote. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands were shaking. I stared at the screen for minutes, hoping I had missed something. But no, I hadn't. I wasn't invited. Not really. Not in name. Not in spirit. I was being erased, rewritten out of my own family's story. And it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen, lights off, wondering where I had gone wrong. Was I too much? Not enough? Had I offended someone without knowing it? I thought back over every conversation, every smile, every shared memory, searching for answers. I came up empty, and that emptiness burned. Still, I needed to know the truth. I needed someone to look me in the eye and explain how this could happen. So I picked up the phone one last time and called my daughter. This time she answered. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. When she picked up the phone, I spoke as calmly as I could manage, even though my stomach felt like it was full of broken glass. I asked her why. Why wasn't my name on the invitation? Why didn't anyone tell me? Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. For a few seconds, all I could hear was her breathing. Then finally she said, it just didn't seem necessary. Just like that. Like I was an extra, not essential to the story of my own granddaughter's life. I remember gripping the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Not necessary, I repeated, trying to understand. I paid for the whole thing, and I've loved Emma since the day she was born. What part of that is unnecessary? She sighed, and I could tell she didn't want to have this conversation. She said something about how it wasn't personal, how they were keeping the invitations simple, and didn't want to list too many family members. But her words were like paper over a bullet wound. Thin, weak, insulting. I didn't argue. I just listened. And every word she said made it clearer. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a printing error. It was a choice, a decision. Somewhere along the way, they decided I didn't matter. Or at least, not enough to be honored publicly. I ended the call before my voice could crack. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of hearing me break. But inside I was already shattered. The days that followed were a blur. I walked around my house like a ghost. The boxes of wedding supplies I'd helped pay for were still in my garage. Ribbons, fake petals, table centerpieces. I'd been so proud when they first arrived. I thought I was part of something beautiful. Now they felt like leftovers from a party I wasn't welcome at. I couldn't even look at them without feeling sick. Friends began calling me, asking if I was excited for the big day. I lied. I said yes. I said I couldn't wait. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want them to hear the truth and feel sorry for me. That was the worst part, knowing that if I told the truth, people would pity me. And I didn't want pity. I wanted answers. I wanted justice. I wanted to understand how love could be so easily erased. I kept hoping Emma would call. I thought maybe she didn't know. Maybe her mother had done this behind her back. Maybe she was too caught up in the planning to notice. I waited. 1 day. 2. A week. Nothing. Not a single message from her. And that silence, her silence, was the most painful thing of all. It told me everything I needed to know. She knew. And she was fine with it. I remember sitting on my porch one morning, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes, and I realized something terrifying. I had become the forgotten elder. The person people nod to politely but don't really see. The one who's given everything but remembered for nothing. I thought of my mother, how she used to warn me that family can be cruel in the quietest ways. I never believed her. I do now. As the wedding day got closer, I tried to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to show up anyway, march right into that venue, head held high, and remind them who I was. Another part of me, the wounded part, wanted to disappear completely. Let them have their perfect little day without my shadow in the background. I didn't know which voice to listen to. Then, a letter came in the mail. It was from the venue, confirming final payment for the wedding package. My name was listed as the primary financial contributor. The total amount? More than I had even realized. My hands trembled as I read it. There it was, in black and white. Proof that I had paid for the event that had cut me out. They couldn't deny it. They could pretend I didn't exist, but the bank statements told a different story. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. I stopped crying. I stopped feeling helpless. I stopped waiting for someone to make it right. If they were going to erase me from the story, then I was going to write my own chapter. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. I had spent too much of my life being quiet for the sake of peace. But what peace did I have now? So I called a lawyer, just to ask questions. The woman I spoke with was kind but firm. She told me I had every right to revoke my payment if the contract allowed it. She asked for documentation, which I had kept. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every email. I sent them all. She said she'd review the case. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That night, I looked at an old photo of me and Emma from her high school graduation. Her arms were around me, her smile wide. I didn't know how we had gotten here. From love to silence, from hugs to betrayal. But I wasn't going to go quietly. They had made a mistake. A big one! Not just by leaving my name off a piece of paper, but by thinking I wouldn't notice. By thinking I wouldn't fight back. Because I would. And I did. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before the sun. Not because I was excited. I barely slept the night before. My mind had been racing all night, playing every moment over in my head. Every conversation, every hurtful silence. But I got up. I showered. I dressed. I put on the same pale blue dress I wore to Emma's high school graduation. The one she said made me look like a queen. I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You still are." I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not the bride. Not her mother. Not the cousins who'd posted endless stories about the wedding all week. I just walked out my front door, clutching the wedding invoice in one hand and the lawyer's letter in the other. My purse held a copy of every receipt I'd collected over the last 10 months. I didn't plan on making a scene, but I wasn't going to be invisible either. The venue was beautiful, I'll give them that. A grand estate on a hill, with a long driveway lined with blooming trees, and strings of fairy lights already glowing in the morning light. Guests in fine clothes were already arriving, smiling, chatting, hugging. I stayed near the back, unnoticed at first. Like a stranger crashing someone else's fantasy. I watched them move about, laughing as if nothing in the world was wrong. Then I saw her, Emma. My Emma. She was standing near the entrance to the ballroom, her hair in a soft updo, her white dress flowing like silk in the breeze. She was radiant, but something inside me clenched. I didn't feel pride. I didn't feel joy. I felt distance. Coldness, like she wasn't mine anymore. Like she hadn't been for a long time. I stood there, heart pounding, wondering if she'd see me, wondering if she'd care. She didn't. She never even looked my way. But someone else did. My daughter. The moment her eyes landed on me, her smile dropped. She stepped away from the bridal party and marched toward me with that tight, angry walk I knew too well. "What are you doing here?" She hissed under her breath. As if I were a stain on her perfect day, I smiled sweetly. "I'm here for the wedding. After all, I paid for it." Her face turned red. "You weren't invited," she snapped. "This isn't the time for drama." I nodded slowly. "And yet, here I am. Isn't that something?" I pulled the envelope from my purse and handed it to her. "You may want to read that before the ceremony begins." She opened it without moving away, eyes scanning the words. Her mouth parted slightly. Then she looked back at me, fear creeping into her expression. "You wouldn't." I said nothing. Just looked at her. Let her sit in it. She stormed off without another word, clutching the letter like it was poison. I stood there a few more minutes, unsure of what I'd set in motion. But I knew it was only the beginning. I hadn't come for revenge. I'd come for the truth, for recognition, for dignity. And if they weren't going to give it to me freely, I was going to claim it myself. Not by yelling, not by begging, but by making sure they felt what it was like to be erased. I sat down at the very back row of the ceremony area, out of the camera's reach. No one greeted me. No one offered me a program or a smile. I might as well have been invisible. And yet, I felt stronger than I had in years. They could pretend I wasn't there, but every flower on the arch, every lace-covered chair, every bite of food that would be served later, that was me, my love, my sacrifice. The music started. The guests stood. Emma walked down the aisle, her arm in her father's. Not her real father, of course. He left when she was 5. But her mother's new husband, the man she grew up calling Dad. I watched her smile, glowing for the crowd, completely unaware that the ground beneath her was already shifting. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just watched, calm, silent, waiting. The vows began. The officiant spoke of family, of legacy, of the people who raised and nurtured the couple. I listened for my name. Nothing. My daughter had rewritten history. She made it look like I was never part of the story. But she forgot one thing. Stories don't just live in memory. They live in money, in paper trails, in facts. And I had all of them. The ceremony ended in applause. The guests rose to mingle. I remained seated, letting them pass. I saw the photographer aiming his lens around the crowd, avoiding me entirely. Of course he did. They probably told him I wasn't welcome, that I was just some old woman who wandered in. But I had other plans. Just as they opened the doors for the reception, a woman in a black suit stepped forward. My lawyer. I had asked her to come quietly and observe. She wasn't there to make a scene either. She was there to deliver a second envelope, one addressed to the venue coordinator. It contained notice that the primary financial backer of the event had withdrawn payment, pending legal resolution. That's when everything began to unravel. I watched from a distance as confusion rippled through the staff. The coordinator rushed to find my daughter. Whispers turned into arguments. Faces paled. Waiters stopped carrying trays. The DJ paused mid-song. It was like watching the first tremor before an earthquake. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone could feel it. Something was wrong. Still, no one looked at me. Until Emma did. She finally saw me. Across the crowd, through the chaos, our eyes met. For a moment, her smile faltered. She took a step toward me, uncertain, like a child approaching a stranger. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I let her feel the space between us, the years of distance she had helped create. She looked like she wanted to speak, but her mother pulled her away, whispering harshly. And just like that, the moment passed. But the damage had already begun. They say every show must go on, but not this one, not the way they planned. As the guests filed into the reception hall, the tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. The lights were dim, the music forced, and the staff, once so polished and efficient, now moved with hesitation. Whispers passed from table to table like wildfire. Something was wrong, and everyone could feel it, even if they didn't yet know what. I stayed seated at the back, watching it all unfold like a spectator at a play I once helped direct, but was now banned from attending. The music shifted to something more upbeat, and the MC tried to recover the mood. He announced the bridal party with exaggerated cheer, calling out names as they entered with forced smiles. But behind their eyes, I could see it. Confusion, panic, questions no one wanted to answer out loud. My daughter was gone for a long while, and when she returned, she was pale, her smile stiff, eyes darting around the room. She whispered something to Emma, who looked visibly shaken now. I saw her glance back at the entrance, where the venue manager stood talking to someone on the phone. She tried to laugh it off, but her shoulders were tense. Her hands clenched the bouquet tighter than before. I waited. I didn't need to do anything else. The wheels were already in motion. At exactly 6:03 p.m., just as the salads were being served, the microphone cut off mid-sentence. A moment of awkward silence followed. Then the venue coordinator stepped onto the stage. She was polite, professional, but clearly uncomfortable. She tapped the mic and cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're experiencing a brief issue with payment confirmation from the booking party. We ask for your patience while we resolve this matter behind the scenes." Gasps, murmurs, forks dropped. My daughter's face turned to stone. I could feel the energy in the room shift. Guests now looking around, puzzled, trying to understand what they had just heard. Weddings are supposed to be smooth, Perfect. Glamorous. No one expects the venue to publicly announce financial issues, especially not in the middle of the reception. And yet here we were. The story was cracking right in front of their eyes. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't happy, but I was resolute. I wanted them to feel what I felt. Unseen, uninvited, and now unprotected. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability, about making sure they knew actions had consequences. They erased me from their celebration, so I reminded them who was keeping the lights on. The music stopped. The waitstaff paused. The open bar closed. The cake was wheeled back into the kitchen. And still no one came to speak to me. Eventually, my daughter stormed across the room and stood in front of me. Her voice was sharp, low enough not to be heard by others, but cold as ice. "You've ruined her wedding," she said. I looked up at her calmly. "No," I said. "You ruined it when you decided I didn't matter." She opened her mouth to argue, but for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. I just stood up and looked her in the eye. Guests were watching now, some pretending not to, others openly staring. Emma stood frozen at her sweetheart table, still dressed in white, but looking lost, as if she had just woken up in the middle of a nightmare. I wanted to walk to her. I wanted her to say something. Anything. But she didn't. And that silence echoed louder than any speech she could have made. The coordinator approached again. "We need to speak privately," she said to my daughter. "We've had to put a hold on all services until payment is secured." My daughter tried to argue, but the manager pointed to the lawyer sitting in the back. "She's already explained the situation. Legally, we can't proceed." There it was. The curtain had fallen. And yet I still didn't feel victorious. I felt numb. This wasn't the way I wanted things to go. I didn't want a ruined wedding. I wanted recognition. I wanted to be loved. But when love is replaced by lies, by erasure, by calculated exclusion, you start to protect yourself in the only ways you can. I wasn't their enemy. I was their mirror, and they didn't like what they saw. Emma finally approached me. She was trembling. Her voice was small. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, tears in her eyes. That question broke something inside me. "I did this for you," I said. "Everything I ever did was for you." But when I asked why my name wasn't on the invitation, no one answered. When I waited for your call, you said nothing. And now you ask why I'm standing up for myself? She looked away, couldn't meet my eyes. That told me everything. I reached into my purse and pulled out one of the handmade cards she gave me when she was a child. I had brought it with me for this moment. It was crumpled, old but still legible. In her tiny handwriting, it said, "Grandma Maggie is my favorite person in the world." I handed it to her. "That's the girl I loved," I whispered. I don't know where she went. She didn't speak, just stood there, clutching the card like it was a piece of glass, unsure whether to hold it or drop it. I waited for her to say something, to apologize, to reach out, but she didn't. And eventually I turned and walked away. The room behind me was falling apart, but I walked out with my head high, not because I wanted destruction, but because I finally understood that being erased doesn't make you disappear. Being quiet doesn't make you weak. And sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop waiting for permission. And I was done waiting. By the time I got home that night, I felt like I'd been run over by an emotional freight train. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my shoes. I just sat on the edge of the couch, staring into the dark. My body was still, but my mind was storming. I replayed every word, every glance, every moment from the reception. There were no winners, only silence, shame, and the slow crumbling of whatever was left of my family. The next morning, I expected a flood of phone calls, maybe even someone banging on my door. But nothing happened. Not a single call. No texts. No angry voicemails. They all went silent, like the entire wedding had been a dream they were trying to forget. But I knew better. That kind of silence isn't peace. It's war without gunfire. And I was right in the middle of it. 2 days later, it finally started. The first call was from my niece. She sounded cautious, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak to me. "I just wanted to say, I saw what happened," she whispered. "I think you were right to stand your ground." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected support. I thought everyone would take sides. and I assumed they'd choose the side with the pretty address and champagne. But then my sister called, then a cousin. One by one, people started reaching out, not just to gossip, but to confess. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had felt erased over the years. My daughter had a history of rewriting people out of stories that didn't suit her narrative. An aunt who was left off a family reunion invite. A cousin excluded from Emma's graduation photos. It was like a pattern that no one ever had the guts to name out loud. Until now, still the core of it remained broken. My daughter hadn't spoken to me. Neither had Emma. I told myself I didn't care, that I had made my point and it was done. But the truth was, it hurt like hell. I didn't want to be right. I wanted to be held. I wanted my granddaughter to knock on my door and say she understood now, that she remembered who I was, that she remembered us. Instead, what came next was a letter. It arrived by mail 2 weeks after the wedding. A single page typed. No salutation. No, dear Mom. Just straight to the point. You embarrassed us. You humiliated your granddaughter on her wedding day. We cannot forgive that. That was the opening line. The rest of the letter was worse. It accused me of jealousy, of manipulation, of turning a joyful event into a scene for attention. It ended with a line that made me go cold. Until you apologize, we will not be in contact. I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, shaking. I reread it 3 times. Every word stung. Not because I believed it, but because they did. My own daughter believed I had done all this out of bitterness. Like I hadn't been the one who sacrificed everything to make that day possible. Like I was the villain in their story, when all I ever tried to be was the foundation. I didn't cry. Not that day. I just folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in a drawer with the others. Photos, drawings, old cards from Emma. That drawer became a tomb for the relationship we once had. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, but I couldn't keep it close either. It sat in between, like the space between what we were and what we had become. Weeks passed. The silence continued. Then something happened I didn't expect. Emma's new husband reached out. He messaged me through email, said he didn't want to get in the middle of family matters, but he felt terrible about what happened. He said he had no idea I paid for so much, that he thought it was all her parents. He thanked me for the reception, even if it didn't go the way they planned. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and it mattered. I replied briefly, told him I appreciated the message, that I wished them well. I didn't ask about Emma. I didn't try to rekindle anything. I was too tired, too worn. There's only so many times you can walk toward someone before you accept they're not walking toward you. But something about his message stuck with me. A week later, a photo surfaced online. Emma and her husband on their honeymoon, smiling on a beach somewhere warm. I stared at it for a long time, not with anger, but with a strange, distant affection. I remembered that little girl who used to sleep on my chest during storms. I remembered how she once asked if I could come to her wedding in a princess dress. I wondered if she remembered too. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. I poured everything into it. My love, my pain, my disappointment, my memories. I wrote to the version of her that still lived in my heart, the one who hadn't forgotten me. And in that letter, I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine, because carrying that pain any longer would only turn me into someone I didn't want to be. The next day, I went outside and sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was soft with early fall light, and the trees had just started to turn. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. No phone calls, no visits, just the wind and the quiet strength of knowing I had stood up for myself. I didn't need to explain it to anyone. I didn't need to apologize. I had spent my whole life building a family, and now I was learning to rebuild myself. 2 months after the wedding, I received a call from my lawyer. At first, I thought it was just a follow-up on the financial dispute with the venue. We had settled it quietly. I had chosen not to push further. I didn't want to ruin their future. I just wanted them to feel, for once, what it meant to be disregarded. But the call wasn't about that. It was about something else. Something I had asked her to prepare long before the wedding ever happened. My will. I had updated it a few years earlier, naming Emma as my sole heir. My daughter had always been reckless with money, and I wanted to give Emma a chance to start a life without the same struggles I endured. She was smart, kind, full of light, or at least she had been. But now, after everything, the thought of her inheriting the house I built, the money I saved, the pieces of me, I couldn't accept it. So I changed it. I asked my lawyer if it was finalized. She confirmed it was. Then she asked if I wanted to make the contents known before my passing. It wasn't a typical request, but I wasn't living a typical life anymore. I thought about it for a long time, and then I said yes, not out of revenge, not to punish, but because I believed the truth should be known, and because silence had done me no favors. The meeting was held at her office, quiet and formal. I invited Emma, my daughter, and a few close family members. I didn't tell them why, just that I had something important to share. They came reluctantly. My daughter walked in with her arms crossed, already defensive. Emma avoided eye contact. I stayed calm. I had nothing left to lose. My lawyer began reading. She started with the standard legal phrasing, then moved into the personal clause, the heart of it all. I had left the bulk of my estate to a women's shelter in the city, a place that took in mothers and daughters who had been broken by the people closest to them, a place that gave second chances to women who had been erased. My home would be donated. My money would fund programs. My name would be etched into a plaque on the wall. Gasps echoed through the room. My daughter's face turned ashen. Emma finally looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I just watched them process it. My lawyer continued. I had left a small symbolic gift to Emma, a box of letters, photos, and mementos from her childhood. The memories I had cherished, the ones she had forgotten. Nothing more. The silence was brutal. No one moved. Finally, Emma spoke. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice cracked, and I saw her hands tremble. For a moment, she wasn't a bride or a stranger. She was my little girl again. But I stayed firm. "Because love is a choice," I said. "And you chose to forget me. You chose silence. You chose convenience. So I chose truth. I chose someone else who needs it more." My daughter exploded. "You're doing this for show. Out of spite," she snapped. But the room wasn't with her. They were still reeling. Some nodded slowly. Others just sat in stunned quiet. I stood up. "I'm doing this because I spent my entire life giving everything I had to this family. And when it mattered most, I wasn't even worth a line of ink on a piece of paper." Emma started to cry. I didn't move to comfort her. It hurt not to. But I couldn't protect her from the consequences of her choices. "Not anymore." She said I didn't know how to fix it. I nodded gently. "Sometimes you don't get the chance to." Then I walked out of the room, leaving behind the ashes of a story they tried to rewrite without me. The media caught wind of the donation weeks later. A small local outlet published a piece titled, "Grandmother Turns Grief into Giving." It was picked up nationally, and for a few days my story was everywhere. I didn't care for the attention, but I did care for the women who started writing to me. Strangers who'd been forgotten by their families, too. Grandmothers, mothers, sisters. My pain had echoed. I made a trip to the shelter myself. They greeted me with warmth I hadn't felt in years. They asked if I wanted to say a few words at the opening of the new wing. I stood at the podium, looking out at women who had lost everything and were still fighting. I told them this isn't about revenge. It's about remembrance, about reminding ourselves that we are not small. We are not disposable. We are the roots that hold families together. After the speech, a young woman hugged me. She whispered, "Thank you for seeing us." I smiled through tears. "I see you because I was you," I replied. And for the first time in a long while, I felt seen too. Back home, I sat in my quiet kitchen sipping tea. No family photos on the wall anymore. Just the sound of the wind through the trees outside. And in that stillness, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness, but the kind that comes from finally speaking your truth, no matter who doesn't want to hear it. The story wasn't over, but I was no longer waiting to be written into someone else's chapter. Life after loss has its own rhythm. It doesn't announce itself with grand finales or fireworks. It arrives quietly, like sunlight creeping into a dark room after the longest night. That's what those next few months felt like. Not a dramatic transformation, but a slow, steady return to myself. I woke up each morning with a little less weight on my chest, a little more clarity in my bones. For the first time in years, I was no longer defined by who needed me. I was defined by who I had become. I started walking every morning. Not far, just around the neighborhood, past the same trees and sidewalks I used to stroll with Emma when she was little. I'd pass the swing set she used to beg me to push her on. I'd remember her laughter, the way she'd run ahead of me in rain boots 2 sizes too big. Those memories didn't hurt as much anymore. They were still bittersweet, but they had softened, like bruises healing into something you can finally touch without flinching. Neighbors began to greet me differently, with kindness, with curiosity. They'd read the article. They knew the story, or at least the version the world had seen. One woman, a mother of 3, stopped me and said, "You did what a lot of us never had the courage to do." I smiled and nodded, but inside I thought, no, I just ran out of reasons not to. My world became smaller but richer. I started volunteering at the shelter I donated to, once a week at first, then more. I helped with meals, read to children, listened to women tell stories that mirrored mine in heartbreaking ways. I wasn't the only grandmother who had been erased. I wasn't the only one who had poured love into a family, only to be left behind. But I was one of the few who got a second chance to give that love where it was actually wanted. And then, one afternoon, Emma appeared at the shelter. I didn't see her come in at first. I was folding laundry, laughing with a teenage girl who reminded me of her. But then the room grew still. I looked up and there she was, standing in the doorway holding a box. Her eyes were puffy, her posture unsure. She looked so much younger than she had at her wedding. She looked scared. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice soft. I froze. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to run to her. Part of me wanted to turn away. But I stood there steady. "Emma," I said simply. She walked closer, holding out the box. "These are your letters, the ones you left me." I read them all. Every single one. Her hands trembled. "I didn't know what I was doing. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what. I didn't take the box. Not yet. I needed more." I said. Until I wasn't. Tears filled her eyes. She placed the box on the table and wiped her face. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For forgetting. For letting Mom treat you like that. For not standing up for you when I should have." Her voice cracked. I thought I was doing the right thing, but it was cowardly. I know that now. I sat down slowly, motioned for her to sit across from me. She did. We didn't hug. We didn't cry together. We just talked. She told me about the wedding after I left, how the mood never recovered, how people kept asking questions they didn't have answers for, how she felt like a puppet in a play she didn't write. She said she thought about me every day since, that her husband encouraged her to come find me, that reading my letters had brought back everything she'd forgotten. The banana bread, the card games, the nights I rocked her to sleep after her parents fought. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said. I nodded. "Maybe not, but you showed up. That's a start." We didn't solve everything in one afternoon, but something cracked open between us, a door that had been locked from both sides. I still didn't know if I could trust her again, but I knew I could love her still. Not blindly, not without boundaries, but honestly, with all the history and heartbreak between us. Weeks turned into months. Emma began volunteering at the shelter too, not because of me, but because she wanted to. Slowly, we built something new, not the same as before, but real. My daughter didn't speak to me again, and maybe she never will. That's a grief I've learned to carry without letting it define me. Not every story gets a neat resolution. Some endings are messy. Some chapters close without warning, but some doors open where you least expect them, and that's enough. Today I sit by my window writing this for the first time, not for pity, not for praise, but for anyone out there who feels invisible, who gave everything and was left with nothing. I want you to know that even after being erased, you can still rewrite your story. You can still claim your space. You can still be the author of your own ending. I was the grandmother they left off the invitation. Now I'm the woman they'll never forget. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but I hope it reminded someone out there that even when the world tries to silence you, your voice still matters. You can lose people, but never lose your worth. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and brave and yours alone. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below if you stayed until the end. Just type, "Still here," so I know you heard me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our next true life confessions. Your support means everything.